The Fair Labor Standards Act has been the law now for nearly 90 years, but nobody understands it. Most lawyers don't understand it. There's sections or subsections in the United States Code, or 18 sections in the United States Code.
Hey, this is Brent Skinner, host of Small Talk Window here at the Work Defined Podcasting Network. Have you ever wanted a short podcast to listen to during a coffee break of your workday? You've come to the right place. My guests dispense with the small talk as quickly as possible and settle into a meaningful conversation around the world of work.
Welcome to Backstage Pass with the HR Rockstar, the show that pulls back the curtain and cranks up the volume on the most pressing HR topics, from talent strategies and workplace culture to career pivots and leadership. Because in today's world, HR isn't just behind the scenes, it's center stage. I'm your host, Jay Arnold, and in the world of HR and talent, there are times we recognize top performers within the workplace, sometimes referred to as rock stars. This podcast combines my love of HR as my career with my experience of 10 plus years performing shows around Michigan and the Midwest in my rock band, chasing the dream of being an actual rock star. Join me as I sit down with rock stars in their fields to have fun, insightful conversations that keep the human in human resources. Together we'll disrupt, innovate, and amplify the future of work. So grab your pass, turn it up, and let's make some noise. Today I'm joined by Jon Hyman, employment attorney from Wickens, Herzer, Panza in the Cleveland, Ohio area, and creator of the Ohio Employer Law blog, where he shines a light on important and key topics related to employment law, HR, and more, with a fun sense of humor that non-lawyers can understand. Hi, Jon. For those that aren't familiar with you, can you share a little bit about your background and what led you into employment law versus other types of law?
Been an employment lawyer for, if I do the math, graduated law school in 97. So that is coming up on 28 years, which is hard to believe when I think I've been doing this more than half my life. So I've always been a management side employment lawyer. That's all I've ever done in my legal career. What led me to being a management side employment lawyer? Employment law was always interesting to me. I think we spend more time at our jobs than we do with our spouses, than we do in our beds. Our careers, our lives are so job and career focused that that always struck me as really interesting to tackle from a legal perspective. And then on the management side, I think I can do a lot of good working with companies on their employment and HR practices from a compliant standpoint to make them better workplaces for people. So taking it from the management side versus taking it from an employee side, to me, I feel like I can do more good. I could do more for the common good by helping businesses make their workplaces better. So that's why I've always practiced from the management side. And now, after 28 years, I'm now 4 years at my current home, Wickens, Herzer, Panza, up in the western suburbs of Cleveland, doing my things.
Wow, 28 years. It just goes by.
I don't think of myself as that old. It's
Same.
when I say it, it sounds weird. But yeah, 28 years. I'm 52 on the planet, so more than half doing the employment law thing. Both professionally and personally. Like some days I feel 32, and some days I feel 72. Today's I'm feeling 32 days, so I'm good to go.
Yeah, I had a memory pop up on my Shutterfly accounts, and it's like 20 years ago yesterday. And I was like, wait, what? And I looked at it. I'm like, that feels like yesterday. How's it 20 years?
And I know your daughter and my daughter are around the same age. And I look back at the memories of when she was 4 years old, 5 years old, whatever. And it doesn't seem like it was a dozen or more years ago, but it's that father time always wins. So here we are.
Over the years, in your time of practicing employment law, what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen in employment law and common legal mistakes you see employers making that could easily be avoided?
Yeah, well, the biggest challenge that I face, because most of my clients are small to mid-sized businesses. So my sweet spot is the small to mid-cap business that doesn't have in-house legal. They usually have an HR person, if not an HR department, but no legal in-house. Some are so small they don't even have HR. They might have a controller or a CFO that's kind of, when needed, puts on the HR hat, but doesn't have HR training or an HR background. So my biggest challenge is training my clients to pick up the phone and call me before they make a decision or do something with an employee, because the 15-minute phone call to your employment lawyer is gonna pay returns times 100 versus what it would cost if you don't call your employment lawyer and then pull the trigger on a decision that ends up getting you sued. Because look, I'm a lawyer. I get how expensive lawyers are, and I feed my kids and pay my mortgage and pay my kids' school tuition based on clients getting sued and me having to defend them in litigation. That's what pays the bills. Much happier when I'm helping clients pre-suit get their compliance right. And so I would much rather have clients call me on the front end, no matter the issue, right? To make sure they get it right. In terms of biggest mistakes I see clients make over and over again, wage and hour is the biggest kind of compliance hurdle that businesses have. The Fair Labor Standards Act has been the law now for nearly 90 years, but nobody understands it. Most lawyers don't understand it. There's, the laws, it's sections or subsections in the United States Code, but then there's thousands of pages of regulations in the Code of Federal Regulations that kind of tell you what that law means. Hundreds of thousands of cases interpreting it in the last nearly 90 years, and people just don't understand it. And so in terms of, someone is so-and-so is salaried, so I don't have to pay them overtime. Well, I mean, maybe, but let's talk about what they do, right? What are their job duties? Do they meet the duties test of the exemption? Because the salary test is only one piece of it. Do they meet the other piece? Or are my employees, wages are confidential and they can't talk about wages? Well, slow your roll, because the National Labor Relations Board might say something different, because your employees actually have a right to engage in protected concerted activity and talk about how much they make. So mistakes around pay are some of the mistakes that I keep seeing over and over and over again. And it's not, I see the term wage theft all the time, and I hate that term because it suggests that employers are actively trying to steal money from their employees. And, the monocle, the guy sitting up at the top of the ivory tower with the monocle in his eye and the top hat on, and then the Monopoly guy tuxedo. It's not an accurate picture of what's happening up in the C-suite, right? CEOs are not trying to actively steal money from their rank and file hourly employees. But that said, they don't always understand what the rules are surrounding how employees are supposed to be paid. So these are sins of omission, right? We got it wrong because we're trying to do the right thing, but we're ignorant about what the law requires. And so there's a lot of, I think, education needed around our wage and hour laws.
This is why I'm glad we're finally able to connect, because HR and employment attorneys go hand in hand together. Obviously, I'm not an attorney. A lot of HR colleagues I know, aren't attorneys, but we have to work together, because I really look at HR and employment law as we're in the risk management business, and we want to ensure we're minimizing risk wherever possible on a compliance piece. Like you said, wage and hour laws. There's so many other things: benefits, administration, employee relations, labor relations with collective bargaining agreements. There's so many areas where you don't want to get into hot water just by accident. So again, having that lawyer on your side, everything you said about helping small and medium-sized business makes sense. The president of our local Detroit SHRM chapter, that's what he specializes in, he is an HR advisor to small and medium-sized businesses. So I can see that from, again, different areas. And it's funny you said that, though, about the Fair Labor Standards Act. I know some people personally that have said, yeah, I had someone approach me and say, they offered me this job and said, well, do you want to be exempt or not exempt? And I was like, wait, that's not how it works. You don't decide.
Yeah. Well, look, you can decide, right? And companies tell me, well, we've paid this person this way, for the last 20 years and they've never complained. And look, every employee is happy until they're unhappy. You don't have to worry about the happy employees. You have to worry about the employees when they become unhappy, and they could become unhappy for like a number of reasons, right? Like I had a case a number of years ago. It blew up into a massive wage and hour class action lawsuit, and the company didn't do anything wrong. And the case ultimately went up to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and we ultimately won the case at the Oklahoma Supreme Court. And I'll get back to that in a second because it's an important piece of the story. But they had a terrible employee that they fired for doing terrible employee things. He was just an awful employee, deserved to lose his job. And he was like a mid 40s white guy. And he goes to his friendly neighborhood employment lawyer, plaintiff's employment lawyer, who was if there was an employment lawyer on the billboards in this town, like that would have been the guy. He was like the guy for employment law in this town. And he's like, well, he listened to the guy's story and he's like, well, I don't think you have a case for your termination, but tell me how you were paid. And then he proceeded to tell them about, well, I get to work at 6:30 in the morning and I clock in and then I sit around the break room and then my shift starts at 7. And then a little before 7, I kind of wind it on my workstation and I start working, which led to this class action lawsuit over what is working time and do the punches matter or does it really matter when these people start working, and how do you define when the workday starts if they're punching in at a certain time but then working at a time that's doesn't correspond to their punches. And then it ended up I mean, it was a 7-figure problem for this company to solve in litigation, but they were new in town. They were a brand new employer. They had just moved to this locality, and they were like, we're not going to be a punching bag for the plaintiffs' lawyers in this town. And so they drew a line in the sand and said, we're going to fight. And they won the fight. It was a 7-figure fight for them to win. So everybody's happy till they're unhappy, right? And then disgruntled employees go talk to the lawyers, and then it turns into lawsuits. And oftentimes these wage and hour lawsuits start with, I was fired and I want to sue over my termination. Well, we don't think you have a case there, but they will, if you look hard enough, you will find, I can walk into any business in America and find a wage and hour violation. Just the laws are just so nuanced and so detailed and so deep and complex that nobody does it 100% perfect.
So someone asked, like, do you want to be a contractor versus a W-2? And the person had no idea what that meant, that they were responsible for their own taxes. And
if you're asking that question, they're a W-2 employee, right. Period. End of story. Hard stop.
Yes.
Like if you say like, do you want to be on a 1099? No, the answer is they're a W-2 and you should pay them as a W-2 employee.
Yeah. I always learned one of the first things is, do you control when and where they show up to work at like a certain time, a certain day? They have to be there at 8 a.m. Yeah. Like you said, W-2.
Right. Yeah. We're redesigning our website here at my law firm, right? And so we hired an agency to obviously, because we're not web designers, right? We hired an agency that's a 1099, right? Outside consultant doing outside consultant things. That's the 1099 employee. That's the 1099 contractor, right? The person that is coordinating the project within the firm and getting them the information they need, they're the employee. And right. it's really not that hard a distinction to make, I don't think, but people get it wrong all the time.
With wage and hour laws, we know that that's a big issue. The workplace landscape has shifted really dramatically post-pandemic. What's one legal issue you think HR professionals aren't paying attention to with the rise of remote work and other things? AI, is there anything, like if you were advising a team of HR professionals saying, this is what I recommend if I was your in-house counsel or you hired me for the day to consult with you, what are we missing from the HR side?
Yeah. I mean, so much has changed in the last 45 days.
Yeah. Right.
the landscape of what the workplace is with, DEI, on the hit list and other things. You mentioned AI, and I think that's a really interesting topic because I don't think businesses have any concept of how many of their employees are using AI and how often they're using it to get their jobs done on a daily basis. My profession, we have legal ethics that guide kind of what we do and how we do it. And so we have an AI policy within my firm because we have ethical rules that we have to follow in how we do our work. And so, for example, I can't put client information into ChatGPT because I can't have a language learning model, learning off of my client's confidential information. That's a big no-no. I don't think businesses have any idea. I don't think most businesses have any idea how many of their employees are using AI, how they're using it, or what it means for their business. I don't think they understand. I don't think the average user of ChatGPT understands, they take what comes out as the gospel and don't understand that you still need to check and verify the results that you're given because it might be accurate. I find more often than not it is accurate, but it might be completely made up, and you have no idea unless you check and verify. I don't think businesses know what information their employees are putting into generative AI models and what that means for the protection of their information, right? I'm going to start asking in every trade secret lawsuit I litigate where I think there is, when I need to determine whether information is actually secret, like, do you have an AI policy? What does it say? And do your employees like violate that policy by putting information that you think is a secret into a generative AI model? Because in that case, I think you're not treating it as a secret, right? So issues that employers aren't thinking about, they don't think about it because I don't think they fully understand the nuances and complexities of what all this means for the day-to-day and how they operate their business.
I took a training on how to use AI within HR, ethically, of course, not putting in employee data or anything like that. One of the things that I took away from that is if you don't have an AI policy already, you're behind as a company.
Oh, you're way behind.
And I know companies that don't.
Yeah, you are way behind, and we're not at the point yet where these language learning models can replace what we do. I think we'll get there at some point where some of the more kind of fungible and mundane tasks are going to be replaced by AI. We're not there yet. I think AI is still in the alpha stage of its development, but it's developing quickly. But I just, it's scary to think kind of where it's going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, as these models continue to develop.
We've handled a ton of cases, and I know we just talked about the one in Oklahoma on the wage and hour law. Is obviously, without mentioning names, is there a particular case that was just so memorable that might have led you to creating our next topic?
I mean, there's lots, but I'll share one, and it's a story in two parts. I'm comfortable sharing it because it's happened a number of years ago. I don't even think the company's in business anymore, but I'll keep names out of it for the sake of protecting the innocent and the guilty. So I represented a trucking company that got sued for sexual harassment. The allegations by a female employee was that the president of the company was sharing pornography around the workplace. And we were retained to come in and defend the lawsuit. We did our investigation. We looked at the computers. We saw no evidence of pornography. We interviewed, it was a small company. We interviewed every employee within the company. Everybody said across the board, no, I've never seen any pornography. We couldn't find any trace of it on any computers. And so we denied the allegations. We denied them in an EEOC position statement. We denied them in our answer to the complaint after the right to sue letter was issued. We denied them in discovery requests, interrogatories, document requests, and requests for admissions in the litigation, right? And now the employee had subsequently moved to Chicago. That's where the lawsuit was filed. So the president of the company is being deposed. I fly to Chicago to defend his deposition. Deposition is going along. And then at some point during the deposition, the lawyer starts asking questions about the pornography, and he pulls out the EEOC position statement and says, and you still say that what you say in here about there being no pornography is accurate. And the guy says, yeah, no pornography never happened within the company. And then they pull out the discovery responses. And again, yeah, there was no pornography in the company. I stand by my responses. And then he pulls out a manila envelope, and he slides this manila envelope across the table. And inside the manila envelope were like a dozen pictures of the president of the company, the guy sitting right next to me, who just, again, denied that this pornography existed. There was like a dozen pictures of him in a hot tub with some, what I later found out were prostitutes in a hotel room somewhere while he was on a business trip. And so, right, so that was the pornography. So this employee had she had the receipts. And the case quickly settled after that point. He was about to get married, did not want his fiancée to find out what he did on business trips. And the case quickly settled after that point. A year and a half later, the company fires this guy for related but unrelated reasons. The lawsuit wasn't really the reason he was fired. There was other things, like they found an 8-ball of cocaine in the ceiling tiles above his desk, and discovered that he was using the company's expense report as like his personal bank account, and some other things. And they ultimately fired him, and that turned into litigation. And then we defended the company on he sued for wrongful termination and for fair value of the company. And that case went all the way to trial. And after a day and a half of that guy being cross-examined on the witness stand, the judge sent the jury out of the out of the courtroom, back to the jury room, and looked at this guy's lawyer, and he had been pounded for a day and a half on the witness stand about all the bad things he did while he was president of this company. And the judge looked at his lawyer and said, I've heard enough. This case is going to settle for this number. They're going to pay it. You're going to accept it. I'm not wasting any more time. And then I'm not wasting any more of my time listening to any of this nonsense. And if anybody screws up the settlement, I'm holding you in contempt of court. I'm not sure that was entirely proper, but it was effective, and the case got settled, and a 3-week trial turned into a 3-day trial, and the case was settled. And part of it was that, he was an owner of the company, and he was owed fair value for his shares, and that was part of what the issue was in the case, was kind of what was fair value. But the judge very quickly decided, this is what fair value is, and you're not getting a dime more than that, and your claims over your termination are worthless because you were justifiably and correctly fired. So that, in terms of like memorable cases in my career, that very clearly stands out as one of the more memorable.
Yeah, that's almost sounds like a movie. Something. One of those like horrible bosses movies or something. We initially connected online years ago on LinkedIn, and I kept seeing this website and these newsletters coming out, and I became a fan very quickly when I discovered the Ohio Employer Law blog. It's really been a go-to resource for years. I always get a chuckle out of it. Sometimes I scratch my head going, this has got to be fake. And I want to message you going, John, did you put this into AI and create something because you're short on time today? Then I realized, no, you didn't. It's so popular on LinkedIn and other platforms. What inspired you to start the blog?
Yeah, it's coming up on 16 years, I think. I think it was 2009. I think I started it. So whatever the math is. Between now and so 16 years, if I'm doing the math right in my head, it's been going on. Why did I start the blog? It was prior to that, just a voracious consumer of information, like legal information. And there was a lot of blogs I read to keep myself updated in kind of what was going on in my practice area, what was going on in the world of labor and employment law. And what I noticed was there was like a gap. There was no one in Ohio that was doing that. They don't tell you in law school that you, in addition to being a lawyer, a problem solver, sometimes accountant, a time tracker, right, that you also have to be a marketer and a business developer. They don't tell you that in law school. But so I was thinking of ways to kind of market myself and my practice and my firm and develop business. I said, I'll start a blog, right? So I was an associate at the time at the law firm I was working at, and I went to the managing partner and said, this is what I want to do. I put together a business plan. I said, it's going to cost you exactly nothing other than the amount of time it takes me to write the articles for the blog. At the time, I had no idea I'd be doing it every day, but I love doing it. So I do it just about every day because I just enjoy doing it so much. It's been a great kind of creative outlet for me to do something kind of law adjacent, but that doesn't, it's not the day-to-day grind of representing my clients. And no offense to my clients, I love you all, but so don't read the term grind to be pejorative at all. But it's something different, something creative. And he said, yeah, if you think you want to do it and it's not going to cost the firm anything, go ahead and give it a shot. And so I taught myself just a tiny bit of HTML to learn how to put it together, built this kind of quick and dirty website, and started publishing. Within about 6 months, I found like a Wall Street Journal reporter had found me. And then I was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal for something I'd written, quote was pulled and that made my law firm very happy. It made me very happy, but it made me realize that there was a lot of benefit to be gained from this. And so I kept doing it, not for that reason, but because I just enjoy the creative process of putting it together day to day. As I am certain if I did the kind of dollars and cents analysis, there's no way I've made as much money on it as I've put into it over the years, but it's okay because it has networked me really well as I've met people like you and, and other people throughout the years I've been doing it that have, that's what the benefit is. The benefit is putting me in contact with and connecting me with like-minded folks around the country, around the world. And so that's been, as I look back, and there's people that I now count as some of my closest friends that I've met solely because I published that blog. And so that's been the real benefit of doing it. But thanks for reading. I really, I really appreciate it.
It's great. I've shared it with colleagues in HR, people from a SHRM chapter, even just family and friends. I love the end of year when you do the top 12 worst employers
Yeah.
award.
Yeah.
We sat there. I remember we sat as a family going, okay, there's 12. And my wife and kids are like, there's no way all 12 of these are real. I'm like, oh, they're real.
They are all real. And again, people have said to me, like, you're a management side lawyer, right? For employers, why are you calling out like the worst employers? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm a management side employer, and employers need to learn, like, this is what will get you in trouble. And so these are, you take the most, they're the most extreme cases, right? Like there's the number of employers that like enslave employees. It's more than one, because I've written about more than one of them. So you wouldn't think, right? You take the extreme cases to say, like, this is what not to do, right? And you can laugh at it, but don't laugh too hard, because there's real people suffering on the other end of these stories. But you laugh and you learn, and you use the pole, like one end of the extreme, right? One pole to say this is awful and egregious, and how not to behave as an employer. And every year I compile these stories as the year goes on. I self-edit, because I don't want, I don't want a list of 24 of people to consider. So I self-edit and put out a poll at the end of the year, and then people vote. And so far, no one's claimed their trophy. I'm still waiting for someone to call me up and say, I won, where's my trophy? I've had winners that have been in prison, and I don't know how that works. If you're mailing a trophy to a federal penitentiary, I don't know how that works. Yeah. So maybe one of these years, someone will take me up on the trophy. And this is year 8. And I think at year 10, maybe I'll do a worst of the decade and take all the winners or losers, I guess, depending on your perspective, and run a vote and see, who's the worst of the worst. But I'm going to keep doing it, because A, people love it, but B, there's never a shortage of stories of kind of awful things employers do. So I think as long as I can write, I'm going to keep running. I'm going to keep running that. I'm going to have people keep cranking out awards at the end of each year.
I'll always be tuning in, but because you go to school, you go to college, law school, and then you work in the workplace on the job training, and you learn a lot of right versus wrong. And I think your blog, especially the one at the end of the year, it almost teaches you what not to do, which is almost as important what to do.
Yeah. I think we do focus a lot on, like, this is the right way to do things. Like, this is from a compliance standpoint, but there's two sides of compliance. It's you do things the right way and don't do things the wrong way. And this is the don't do things the wrong way side of compliance. Yeah, absolutely.
What's been the favorite or most popular post, do you think? And why do you think it resonated?
I did one. There was one I wrote. So the vice president of Microsoft, former VP of HR of Microsoft, wrote an article in, I don't remember if it was in Forbes or Fortune, or one of the kind of business magazines. And he titled it HR is not your friend. And the point is, like, HR is, they represent
I remember that article.
They represent, what's that? Yeah.
I remember that article.
They represent the business interest. They're not the friend of the employee. And so stop thinking of HR as your friend. They're not going to do you any favors, kind of thing. And we represent the C-suite, and we only represent the C-suite. And that really pissed me off when I read that, because I don't think of that as the job of HR. I think of the job of HR. I mean, HR is not the enemy of the employee. I don't know if HR is the friend of the employee either. I think there's kind of a sweet spot in the middle. But if HR is always and only representing the interests of the business and pushing a narrative that says that the CEO is always right or management is always right, you're going to get sued a lot. I think the job of HR is to push back when they see things that are being done incorrectly, to when an employee is being harassed, stand up for the employee. When an employee is being discriminated against, stand up for the employee, right? When someone's not being paid correctly, make sure you fix their paycheck and make sure they get paid correctly. When a policy is illegal, push back and get it fixed, right? You are the voice of compliance in the organization and for the employees. And sometimes that means the business is right. And sometimes that means that you need to make tough decisions that impact employees, right? Layoffs aren't fun, right? But sometimes layoffs happen when people lose their jobs. Terminations aren't fun. I fired people. It sucks. Even people that deserve to lose their jobs. Firing someone sucks. There is nothing good about firing someone and causing them to lose their job. Even people that deserve to lose their jobs. So, HR is not always going to be on the side of the employee, the friend of the employee, but it doesn't mean they're always looking out for the interests of the business either. I think effective HR does both. And that article really, when I read that, it really, really pissed me off. That one sticks out as something that really kind of struck a chord with people. I mean, it might just be because my audience is, I have a lot of HR professionals in my audience, and they were like, yeah, that's 100% right. But that from a viral standpoint, that one sticks out as one that really, resonated with people.
I think it goes back, you said, like, do they just represent the C-suite? We talked earlier, HR is in the risk management business, at least from my perspective. At the end of the day, HR employees too. We still work for the company. And there's so many great HR people that I've worked with and I've met, and they want to do right by the company while taking care of their employees. They want to have that best employer place to work on their digital footprint and hang signs in their lobby that they're a great employer to work for. And like you said,
who wants to be known as being an awful place to work, right? Like who wants that as their goal? Like what HR professional wants, manage the worst workplace in America on their tombstone? It shouldn't be anybody's goal.
We talked a little bit about the blog. Have you ever had someone reach out to you and they've read an article and they felt very passionately that you were right or wrong on something, or they looked at it from a different perspective it changed their approach to HR employment law going, there's always a different side of it. You have to look at things from different points of view.
If you read the comments on LinkedIn, there's people that disagree with me every day.
Oh yeah.
Some I engage with because I can't, they say don't feed the trolls, but sometimes I can't help it because it's too much fun not to. I've had the ones that I recall or that stand out in my mind are where I've written about a case, like I've written about a lawsuit or a case, and I've had the individual, the employee, the plaintiff, like reach out to me and say, hey, like you wrote about this and that's not really what happened, or it's difficult for me to find a job because you wrote about this case. And when you Google my name, that's the first thing that comes up is this thing that you wrote about the thing I did that got me fired from my last job. Like there's lots of reasons why you sue or don't sue an employer. But one of the reasons, if I can give some advice to the employees for a second, one of the reasons why you might not want to sue an employer is because that does become a matter of public record. And employers do background checks. And if they don't find it, if I don't write about it on my blog, they're going to find it through a court docket or some other means. Employers don't like hiring employees that have a track record of suing other employers. And so that's like a legit consideration why you might not want to sue your company. And like everything I write is like, I don't want to get sued, right? Because of something I write online. And so everything I write, I'm sure the facts are accurate, or at least accurate based on like what's written up in the judicial decision, right? That's what I base these on. And so I don't think I've ever changed anything I've written. The other thing you talk about articles that kind of resonate or that went viral. The one that now is thought of another one now. I wrote a number of years ago about hiring sex offenders and why like I wouldn't do it and why I don't think hiring registered sex offenders is a good idea. I think there's just too much risk involved. And somebody put that on some sex offender message board, like a message board that's used by sex offenders to like talk about sex offendery issues with each other. And it went crazy viral. Like it was viewed like millions and millions of times, that post. And I started getting nasty messages from registered sex offenders about how I'm wrong and how we're people too. And, who are you to tell employers not to hire us? We deserve a second chance and blah, 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 blah. And maybe they do deserve a second chance, but if it's a client that I'm representing or it's my business, I'll let someone else give them that second chance because I just don't want the inherent risk that goes along with hiring someone that's on a sex offender registry for committing a sex crime. So that sticks out to me as well as something that I didn't expect was going to be controversial. And I guess it's really not, maybe just within that one community because someone happened to who knew there was even a message board for sex offenders, but there is. And that's where that post landed. And it got a lot of very heated feedback from a very small segment of society.
One of the things that I've noticed with our LinkedIn activity where we follow each other and comment is that you have a real strong passion and love of music.
I do.
I'm in the Motor City, Motown. You're in your Cleveland, so Rock and Roll Hall of Fame territory. I've always had this debate going. I think a DJ in Cleveland said rock and roll for the first time. That's why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is there.
Yep, Al Freed.
Yep, versus Motown, right? And I'm like, what city? So there's always been that fun back and forth, whether it's sports or music. What kind of music gets you pumped for the day? If you're preparing for a case, or just your normal work day, what gets you going?
I always have a couple of go-tos. So my two favorite bands, if I'm saying like this is like the go-to bands that I listen to. So it's either going to be the old 97s, which is all country band out of Dallas. It goes back to the 90s, the late 90s, mid to late 90s, and is still putting out new music today. Or it's going to be the White Stripes. Those are my two go-tos. Good Detroit bands. So we're huge White Stripes fans in my house, my daughter included, and so we went to Detroit a bunch of years ago. I think my son wanted to go to Legoland for his birthday, and we don't have a Legoland here, but the closest one is kind of just north of Detroit. I think it's outside of Auburn Hills, if I remember correctly, where it is. So
10 minutes from my home.
Perfect.
I know exactly where it is.
So we're driving back from Legoland after his little birthday shindig at the Legoland place there. And so we stopped at Third Man Records out in the Cass Corridor there, our pilgrimage there. And we've now gone to all three. I've been to Detroit, I've been to Nashville, and we just came back from London. And so now I've been at Third Man in London as well. So I can check them all off my Jack White scorecard. So my daughter, who's a big White Stripes fan, says, can we stop and see the Hotel Yorba, the White Stripes song Hotel Yorba on their White Blood Cells album? And so I'm like, sure. So I put the Hotel Yorba into our GPS. Out it comes, and I didn't realize that it was in like the worst possible part of Detroit to go to. It was a freaking nightmare. And so we go, we take some pictures, and then my wife and my son are in the car because they don't really care. But Nora and I are outside this hotel. I'm taking pictures outside the Hotel Yorba. And then this like 1978 like caddy pulls up and tries to entice I think she was 10 at the time, year-old daughter to get into their car. And I'm like, just don't look back, just run as fast as you can, go back to the car. And we were out of there as quickly as we could be. It's this as the verse, the line in the song says, all they got is vacancy. And now I know why.
When my band was playing around Metro Detroit and Michigan, it was the same time period, right before that album broke. So in that time period, and once it did break, you could even, be at a local show at the Magic Stick, Magic Bag, Smalls, and then look over and there's Meg White 10 feet from you, checking out her friend's band. Or because it's like anything, a small community, no matter how big things get, it's still a small community.
We have it here too. Cleveland's, it's a big town, but a very, very small, very tight-knit music community.
Yeah, I think we tried playing the Grog Shop. It never worked out. I don't even know if it's still around, but
it is still around. It is still. I've seen some great shows at the Grog. It's a cool little bar.
Yeah, we never got to Cleveland for a show. We got to Toledo and Bowling Green. So we played Howard's and Bowling Green, and I think Frankie's in Toledo. I think that's where we played. We played once in Cincinnati as well. It was funny. We got booked to play this college town and played there in the middle of summer. There was no one around.
You're like, yeah, we have a gig. And it's like, oh, yeah, all right.
They're like, yeah, it's right outside the University of Cincinnati. I'm like, oh, this is great. We get there. We're like, the school's not even in session. How did we not catch this?
Hey man, I tell my daughter's a musician. I tell her, a gig's a gig. So,
yep.
Sometimes you'll be playing for, she's played, in front of 1,500 people at the Rock Hall, and she's played in front of, like 2 people in a bar, and it's a gig's a gig. So it is what
exactly.
it is.
If you could swap careers and be a rock star for a day, what band would you want to play with, or what artist?
Man, oh man, oh man. I mean, I guess I could be cliche, and well, first of all, nobody wants me and my absolute zero musical ability whatsoever in their band. But if I could wave a magic wand and be able to sing and play an instrument, I guess I could be cliche and say the Beatles, but that's probably too trite of an answer. So I would say, if I could play with any band, I would love to have been able to go back. Do I get a time machine too?
Sure.
All right. Then I would love to go back in time, and I would love to have been part of the Ramones back in the mid 70s when they were up and coming, playing CBGBs. I would love to have been there for that, right? So, and I might be a Ramone because Joey Ramone's his birth name is Jeffrey Hyman, and I've tried to track the lineage, and I can't find any evidence that he and I are related. But in my heart of hearts, I believe I'm a Ramone, so I'm going to go with it.
That's awesome. When we went to New York City for a showcase a number of years ago, and we were more interested in going to historic venues that were part of this big music showcase. We went to CBGB's. I'm like, I have to be here just to check out the place.
Right.
Saw some awful band. And I'm just like, there was a couple of bands at night, and I was like, one was awesome, and then one was just like, what am I doing here? There's a dog walking around the bar. I'm like, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Oh, the history of that venue and the Ramones and so many other great things out of New York City. It's just in the scene back then.
Yeah, we were just in London over Christmas, and like you can't trip in London without falling into something that's like crazy rock and roll famous. Like it's just everywhere, and they have these blue plaques all over the city that tell you like who, like what happened where. So like we went to we had a drink at the bar where the Rolling Stones had the actual Beggars Banquet. They had the release party for the Beggars Banquet album, and so they say like this is like they called the release party the Beggars Banquet, right? So we had a drink at the bar where the actual Beggars Banquet took place. Like we did a Beatles tour and toured all this stuff, all these Beatles locations around London, and there's David Bowie recorded here, and like the Clash were here, and it's just you can't turn around without literally walking into something like famous, like musically famous in London. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, we have family in northern Spain, and we went to visit them almost 2 years ago, and in Barcelona as well. And we've always talked about like, what is our trip to Europe going to look like? We want to go to England, but I'm like, if I go to England, it's got to be a certain amount of days because I have to do those types of things. And I know like, well, my family will be fun for a day. Even they're like, Dad, too much music stuff. We want to go see the Eiffel Tower in Paris. As we're starting to wrap up, what are some takeaways for HR professionals and business leaders that are listening? Is there one key piece of advice you would give them about staying compliant and proactive with employment law?
Don't be afraid to call your lawyer. That is not meant to be sales pitchy at all, particularly the small business. I get it. You're cost conscious. You don't like getting bills from your lawyers. I get it. I promise you that the 15-minute phone call will save you years of headaches and expense. So don't be afraid to call your lawyer before you fire somebody, before you make a decision that could impact how someone is getting paid, or some time off, or a reasonable accommodation issue, a medical leave. These are all issues that are just ripe to land you in court and cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. On top of, we all know like 99% of cases settle, very few go to trial because there's just too much risk and too much expense. So you're paying me, you're paying the settlement. Again, that's how I pay my mortgage. Not going to bother me, but it's going to bother you. And take the time, make the phone call. Everybody says the lawyers are there to say no. We're not here to say no. We're here to say yes, but say yes correctly. Guide you to use that yes to guide you compliantly to do things legally and correctly and not land you in court. I never say no unless I know there's no way to say yes legally. And so use us as a resource. You will never regret that 15-minute call with your employment lawyer.
I'd like to jump into what I call the encore section and pick your brain on a couple fun topics. We talked a little bit about music. What was the last show or concert you attended?
The last show I was at was Alanis Morissette, someone I've always wanted to see and never saw and that's been a bit. I mean, I see my daughter play a lot. The true answer is my daughter Nora, I watch her play all the time. But in terms of like national touring acts, Alanis, we have coming up. We have Jack White coming up next month. We have Frank Turner, someone I've never seen before, but I'm really pumped to go see Frank Turner. He's coming up here in May. So those are the next two I have coming up. Alanis was the last big touring act I saw.
That's awesome. What is a guilty pleasure of yours?
Guilty pleasure of mine, I would say broad-based alcohol, right? So, and that sounds awful because I'm not an alcoholic. Hi, my name is John. No, that's not, I'm not. But in addition to my employment law practice, I also have a beer law practice where I represent breweries. I got into that on the employment side, but it's much more broad-based. I do offer general counsel services to breweries, not just employment law. And so I love craft beer. I love red wine. I love bourbon. I love gin. Those are like my 4 vices of choice, I guess. So a good pint of craft beer, a glass of red wine, a bourbon, and gin. Those are kind of the 4. And, funny enough, my grandfather, way back in the day, like pre-World War II, he and my great-grandfather owned a piece of a winery in Sonoma called Valley of the Moon, which still exists to this day. And as I was told the story, and again, I wasn't there, so I can only relay what I was told, but as I was told the story, when World War II started, in addition to their winery business venture on the West Coast, we're all East Coast people. They were living in the New York area at the time, and they had owned a bunch of hotels in the New York area, and they had to decide, are we going to sell the winery or are we going to sell the hotels? And they decided to sell the winery because the wine industry in California had not yet developed the way it's developed now. And so I think to myself, like, had my grandfather or my great grandfather made the decision to sell the hotels and keep the winery, like my life would have turned out like wildly differently. I mean, I could easily be a fourth generation winemaker in Sonoma and not a first generation employment lawyer in Cleveland. So
That's crazy. I have family in that area, and I spent my childhood every summer out there. Hi, Mom. So when she watches this,
stop by Valley of the Moon next time you're out there. It's still around. You know, the Modells owned a piece of it at some point, but no more. So.
Knowing my family, they'd be like, oh yeah, we have friends there or something. So, what is a fun show or last show you binge watched on any of the platforms like Netflix or HBO, Hulu?
We're really into The Pit right now on Max.
Yep.
It's the Noah Wyle, who was like John Carter on ER. It was, as I understand it, it was designed to be a sequel, like a direct sequel to ER with him playing John Carter. And then the estate of Michael Crichton, who created ER and created the character, sued to stop that from happening. So they pivoted, and it's a medical show that takes place in an emergency room with Noah Wyle playing an ER doctor not named John Carter. It's awesome. I'm a sucker for a good medical show. It's awesome. Highly recommended. I'm really enjoying Slow Horses on Apple TV. And then we are massive Ted Lasso fans in my house. I've watched, I think it's 5 times through completely. We did the full Ted Lasso tour, and we were in London, and we went to Richmond for a day and spent the day touring around with a tour guide, touring around all the filming sites around Richmond, which was really, really cool. But huge Ted Lasso fans. I actually, my top show ever, when I was on Twitter, I'm not anymore because of Elon, but when I was on Twitter back in the day when Ted Lasso first came out, I tweeted so much about the show that Apple TV sent me a Ted Lasso thank you present. I got a DM from Apple TV saying, we want to thank you for doing so much to publicize the show, and we want to set. I thought it was a scam. And they wanted my address. I'm like, can you prove to me that you are? And so I figured they were legit. And so I gave them my address, and 2 months later, this box shows up, this Ted Lasso gift box. I got a Believe sign. I got a Ted Lasso soccer jersey with the little Apple insignia on the sleeve.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And a couple of, I think, a visor and a couple of other things. Maybe I think a box of biscuits. I was floored. So yeah, Ted Lasso will always be the number one TV love of my life. So
that's awesome. We, believe it or not, have not seen the show. We just got Apple TV for free because we just got.
You need to fix that, and you need to remedy that immediately.
So it's on our to-do list, and we just got Apple TV free last week because we got new phones. I've heard so much about this show. We got it. That's our next show we got to watch.
Yeah, Slow Horses. If you like spy stuff, Slow Horses is really, really good too.
John, this has been great. If companies watching this, a business owner, an HR person, a lawyer, if anyone just wants to get in touch with you to pick your brain, have a consultation on an issue, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
You can literally Google Jon Hyman employment lawyer. I don't hide, so I'm easy to find. But my law firm website, wickenslaw.com, you'll find me there with all my contact information. You can find me on LinkedIn at Jonathan Hyman, because there was a Jon Hyman that already had that profile when I signed up for LinkedIn. So it's Jonathan Hyman on LinkedIn. The Ohio Employer Law blog, you'll find me there as well, ohioemployerlawblog.com. But you can literally just Google my name, Jon, Jon Hyman, Hyman, or find me at my law firm, and I'm happy to connect with.
That's great. I'll have everything in the show notes as well. John, this has been great, and it was wonderful to sit down to connect after years of following each other, having some laughs and head scratchers online, saying, really? If I'm ever in the Cleveland area for a show or something, or you're in Metro Detroit, we should definitely have to meet up for a beer, meet up for a glass of wine, do a brewery tour or something, or go see a show and just connect.
Absolutely.
Share
I would
some
love
stories.
To. Absolutely.
Maybe jam with your daughter one day since she plays guitar. So
that too. All of the above.
For sure. All right, HR Rockstars, if you found value in this, please be sure to like and subscribe and keep rocking HR excellence.